Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fundraising Today. I am joined by a gentleman that I've wanted to have on the show for quite a while now. So it is my joy to honor Nathan Chappell to the show today.
Awesome. Thanks, Leah. It's so great to be here. I was looking at the people that you've had on the show, and so many people I have just tremendous respect for: Dana Snyder and Soraya Alexander and Keisha Palmer and Gabe Cooper. So I am, no, truly the honor is mine to be in that company. So I can't wait to learn from you.
Oh, I'm hugely flattered. It's amazing to think back that we've been doing this show since 2018. Had some amazing folks come through the door. Once again, really happy to have you with us today. So, Nathan, you are the author of The Generosity Crisis. Before we get into our main topic today, which is AI, artificial intelligence, and fundraising, I'd love to get a more background about you and the impetus behind writing this book, because I think it will play a really important role in informing some of the different things we talk about today when it comes to AI.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to be here. And truly, it's interesting because people ask, like, how do you get into both AI and generosity crisis? What do they have in common with one another? So it's great to unpack all of that. But I feel so fortunate that kind of the two areas that I just was passionate about throughout my entire career. I got into nonprofit as a technologist prior, 20 something years ago, started and sold two tech companies, ended up spending 20 years leading nonprofits where I really applied more for-profit business practices in those nonprofits, and then started getting really deep into AI 2017. And then for a number of years, I was, as a nonprofit leader, concerned about the decline in household participation. So in terms of the numbers of individuals that were giving. So I think just fortuitously, what is the application of AI to help solve for this quote unquote generosity crisis? And does a crisis exist? And if is it only my organization that's struggling with this idea of raising more money from less people? And it's been an amazing 18 months or so since the book came out, just to hear the response and almost in a way creating a safe space to talk about what's not going well in our sector, which I don't think we were very comfortable with doing. And so it's just been a kind of a wild ride since the book came out, and just been incredibly flattered to spend so much time with nonprofit leaders and volunteers and tech leaders around the areas that we can improve upon. And that's really what it's about.
I don't think any of us would say that Americans or people are any less generous in their day to day lives. I don't think they would perceive themselves to be such. But I do think that we're seeing a shift in how people give with things like crowdfunding, peer to peer looking different, even rising ways of transferring funds from one person to another with digital platforms like Venmo and PayPal and Zelle, all of which are ways that are difficult to track according to the ways that we've usually measured generosity and giving to 501c3s in the US.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. We even say in the book, perhaps there's not a generosity crisis. Perhaps it's just a redistribution of generosity in different forms. And we've never had so many different ways of expressing our generosity. There are some, this is a really, probably number one reason I don't get invited to a lot of parties, because I'd say this is a really fun topic to have at a dinner party. And a lot of people don't invite friends that are just going to be doom and gloom the whole time. I would say on one side of the coin, yeah, there's absolutely undisputed a decline in the number of households that give to traditional 501c3s, right? So that 16% decline in the last 20 years, it's not just the US, but it's Canada and the UK and Australia. Most developed nations have a very similar trajectory. So essentially, the average person is essentially questioning the relevance of a nonprofit, and whether or not those nonprofits are they a hindrance to generosity, or are they amplifying the generosity? And a younger generation that is very used to growing up and questioning everything is really asking the question, like, what does the tax status even matter? Like, why does 501c3 designation even mean anything if I can make a difference either in the purchases I make, or I can go on GoFundMe and help a neighbor? What is the relevance of the nonprofit? And so the book is really focused on to calling that to question, right? Because people like Elon Musk says all his companies are philanthropy. And if philanthropy is the love of mankind, then he defendably will say all of his companies are philanthropy. So the question, of course, is that if I buy a Tesla, am I a philanthropist? So that's on one end. But that doesn't help the 10 million people, even in the US, that work for nonprofits, or the 1.7 million nonprofits that are really struggling right now to figure out, when does this stop? At what point do we start stop losing these donors. And frankly, the book is a fairly stark wake up call to saying, look, if we continue on this path, giving to traditional nonprofits ends in 49 years. If we don't screw it up even more than we're screwing it up now, but it's really a call to this idea of radical connection and this idea of like people giving to people. A lot of what you shared is that there's more opportunities to give back and to pay it forward than there ever have been before. And I think those are things that we wrestle with in modern society.
I think in the same way that we think about how different ways of giving are disrupting some of these traditional ways to express generosity, artificial intelligence is doing a really similar thing in how we work. Generative AI came on the scene in a big way last year, or actually it was 2022 with ChatGPT.
Mhm.
So a lot of people right now are asking questions around AI and their relevance in the workplace, how it's going to change the way that we get things done. I'd love to get some of your thoughts on the impact that artificial intelligence is making and will make on fundraising and nonprofits.
Yeah, this is such an interesting convergence, right? Because when we, at the end of the day, where we're thinking about what the incentives are and why AI is being used almost unilaterally is around doing those things that you just making your life easier, right? It's around creating efficiency, and it's creating efficiency through understanding you better. And so predictive AI, which has been around real frankly since 1955, but really in the last 10, 15 years, predictive AI has just gotten really good at understanding what are you going to do today? And that's the area of creating precision around prediction. What are you going to do today? Is this the moment to ask you to buy something or to just learn about something or whatever? And then to your point, the plus on is generative AI, which is around that personalization. So now we can get that prediction with this tremendous amount of personalization at scale. But at the end of the day, all of that is being used, and the private sector has gotten really good at leveraging this technology to really essentially build connection. And the way that for-profit businesses are incentivized now in the stock market are that not just based on selling products or creating transactions, but they're rather on creating lifetime value. Not just selling you a pair of shoes, but like selling a pair of shoes to you and everyone in your family, not just this time, but next time and the time after that. That's how the stock market values for-profit entities now. So there's a lot to say that while AI has gotten really good at understanding, and now with generative AI, like pronouncing connection and building connection, that it calls into question of the from a nonprofit perspective, what are you in business of doing? And nonprofits are also in the business of building connection. But in the past, nonprofits were competing against nonprofits for charitable dollars. And the realization, and really what one of the biggest takeaways from our book and probably 10,000 conversations in the last year is that nonprofits are not competing with nonprofits. They're competing for connection, and they're competing against organizations that have done this really well and really understand how to leverage precision and personalization at scale. And that's just a whole different playing field. So first, I think it comes to awareness. We're not competing for dollars, we're competing for connection. What are the elements of connection? So trust and authenticity. And how do you do that at scale? And how do you do it efficiently so that it's not just let's raise money, a dollar from every person on the planet, but let's use AI to identify the very best people that aren't going to just make a gift, but are going to stay with us for a long time and tell their neighbors and their friends about what we're doing and align with us in that really visceral way.
When it comes to nonprofits, I think about how valuable connection is. And I think a lot of fundraisers are asking themselves this question of what channels do I need to be in to bolster the connection that my constituents have with my nonprofit? How many different segments do I need to have? I think that when it comes to artificial intelligence, people just have so many questions that they feel overwhelmed of where even to begin.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's such a good point. And I know there's a lot of AI hype and there's a lot of AI FOMO, and our sector is usually resistant to change and is woefully behind in investing in things like charitable or philanthropic R&D. We just don't do that. We wait till there's other proven ways of doing things and that they're really affordable. And that needs to change, obviously. I think for the first and foremost, the importance of understanding what an algorithm is, and essentially the idea that every algorithm is essentially based on capturing attention, right? Its measure of success is, did it get you to spend to swipe one more time, like in your Instagram feed of looking, like it's just overwhelming. And so when your algorithm learns, or the Instagram algorithm learns that you're going somewhere very quickly, right? Just based on either if you clicked on something, heaven forbid, if you swiped up past it really quick, or if you paused on it even for a millisecond. Algorithm is essentially, and these are not my words, Tristan Harris, who was in The Social Dilemma, talked about this several years ago. Algorithms are essentially a race to the bottom of the brainstem. They're essentially wanting you to just pay attention for one more millisecond. And if you do, it rewards itself by like enhancing its ability to create one more millisecond to the point where the average person scrolls 300 feet on their phone a day at this point, which is astounding to think about. And by next year, the average person in the US will have over 5,000 algorithmic decisions made on their behalf. So 5,000 a day compared to the number of people that you're interacting with is usually on 8 to 10 people, humans a day. So if I'm a fundraiser, I think first and foremost, like understanding like an algorithm is essentially trying to capture your attention. And so an algorithm in the nonprofit space is the same thing. It's trying to essentially capture attention to get through the noise so that it pays attention to you. I think there's a lot of fear around algorithms in the nonprofit space, and fundraisers really are in that idea of, is it going to take my job? And of course, it will never take my job because robots don't understand the art of fundraising. The reality is, like we've seen with ChatGPT has read every book, not just on psychology ever written, but also every book on philanthropic psychology, which there's fewer of. It understands the motivations of giving. So rather than a fundraiser making this like a bioptic decision of it's good or bad, there's really no moving forward successfully without adopting and learning and enabling your ability to be a fundraiser, to leverage the same tools that the private sector is using to capture attention, to use that within your organization. And it's a scary time for a lot of people because that represents a lot of change. But in the AI world, we say that 70% of AI transformation has nothing to do with data or models. It has to do with the people that are using it. And so we talk about human-centric AI, which I kind of subscribe to and I'm not. I feel like AI is it's a tool that we want to learn to serve us more efficiently and really create efficiency and precision around us. But it's something that I don't think many organizations and many fundraisers will have success in the next 2 to 3 years saying, no, that's bad, I'm not going to use it. I think there'll be a great digital divide in the near future of those that have leveraged this tool, that are moving past their peers. They're getting different higher level jobs faster because they're learning how to essentially build that connection faster and better at scale.
I'd love to start painting a more concrete picture about how we may expect to see AI impacting the way that they fundraise and the way that they market. One of the projects that you started recently is Fundraising AI. So could you tell us a little bit more about that and some of the topics that you're tackling in that project?
Yeah, thanks for highlighting it. This is definitely a passion project. It's one of those things that you stumble along not realizing it was going to be all consuming, and now I have another full-time non-paid job. It actually goes back to 2017. We built our first algorithm while I was working at a cancer hospital, and it was this idea that we had 2 million patient visits a year. Only 2% of patients ever make a gift normally to a hospital. So needle in a haystack kind of thing. And when we built our very first algorithm, it took us a year and a half. It was painful, but we were getting 0.6% response rate in before we were using AI. In our very first version, the super crude version, we were getting 2.1%. We were like, oh my gosh, like kind of mind blowing. Like this thing worked on this for a year and a half and we quadrupled our response rate. And it immediately struck me at the time, so going back 2017, that this was a really tremendous power for good, but there also had tremendous power for bad. And while we look at, and we've seen examples of this in the private sector over time, where like Twitter created an algorithm that was racist and ageist and Islamophobic and ableist, which they did, and their stock price went down. Like it was not a good day for Twitter. That if the nonprofit did that, it would impact all nonprofits. It wouldn't just be the one organization, especially if it was a large nonprofit and they were using AI, quote unquote, irresponsibly, that it would affect and essentially diminish trust at scale within the nonprofit sector, that people are like, oh, you're all doing this and you're just manipulating. And so 2017, I really decided we needed to come together with some people who felt the same way, that saw the power of good in AI, but also were willing to be cautious about it and to be strategic. And so fast forward, what happened? Obviously, we had about 20, 30 people involved, and the pandemic happened. So then obviously that kind of put a damper on things as we were more worried about where we were getting toilet paper than whether or not AI was gone rogue. But then fast forward after the pandemic, it's been this resurgence of, I think, the power of AI and now the democratized power of AI that everyone has access to GPT or Bard or Perplexity or whatever your or Claude or whatever you like to use. And we see that there's tremendous good potential for good and also tremendous potential for bad. And so fundraising AI was birthed out of, frankly, a bunch of people, and obviously Pursuant being part of, that came together that thought, this is beyond a marketing initiative. This is a business imperative. This is frankly, it's a philanthropic imperative that if our industry did this wrong, we could diminish trust. And that 49 years of the generosity crisis is going to be 14 years. But if we do it, what would be the potential to reversing the generosity crisis, to actually enabling organizations to connect at people based on connection, not based on their wealth, based on lots of data, understanding, is this person raising their hand and they're saying, hey, pay attention to me, I want to learn more, or intervene when people are starting to fall off the radar. And we're now at, last year we had 66,000 people that participated in Fundraising AI, which Pursuant was a great sponsor of. This year we're aiming for 10,000 people at the same summit. And I think until every article we read uses the word responsible, either before or after, at that point, we'll know we've done our job. But at this moment, when I audit lots of AI articles and podcasts on a weekly basis, if the word responsible is used, it's usually the last paragraph, the last line of the last paragraph. So we've still got a long ways to go, because at the end of the day, again, nonprofits have a lot to lose. Trust is very easily lost and hard to gain. And we don't have a pair of Nike shoes to sell, even though you don't trust Nike, which I'm not saying you don't, that they still might have the shoes that fit your foot the best. And nonprofits have trust and only have trust, which is why I think we have to hold ourselves to a higher level of responsibility.
How can a fundraiser keep humans at the center of their fundraising efforts while at the same time leveraging AI to do more faster? Because, of course, with trust being the most important factor, nonprofits have to walk that balance of keeping up with the times, but also ensuring that their communications and their relationships remain human.
Pretending like using AI or generative AI to produce something that goes to a donor directly with no human interaction is like sending someone a Hallmark card and pretending that cut the paper and drew the picture on the front and came up with the little quip on the inside and thinking and passing it off for them to like, oh, you did this for me. And all you really did was sign your name. I think in our sector, it absolutely calls the question, like, how do you keep authenticity front and center? I will say hallucination was, oh, I can't use it because it hallucinates or it doesn't sound like me. That's not a forever thing. Like that's already like in 12 months has gotten infinitely better. And this is exponential technology. So it will improve exponentially. So it's not 5 years and generative AI will outperform a really good writer. You know, it will be like 18 months. Like it's very fast. But I do think we have to surround, while we have these tools to create efficiency, and ideally we have more time because of that efficiency. There's two paths. If we take the path of, okay, I have more time, I'm going to send out more crap, then we're going to get more crap. And the generosity crisis is actually going to continue to be exacerbated by AI because more is not the answer. People cannot consume more than they're already consuming now. But if we take the other path, and this is a really popular stance in healthcare, if we take the other path to say, okay, this AI gave us more time, we're going to spend more time human to human because we can offload the things that were really arduous and that we're taking our time and we were only marginally good at to begin with. But we're going to take that extra time and spend it one-on-one or just by, I've got an extra half an hour in the day because of generative AI. I'm going to start my morning by just calling people to say, I'm thinking of you. How are you doing? I just want to leave a voicemail to say, you're on my mind today. How amazing would that be for our sector? That's where I think the pendulum has moved so far to the transactional. In the 20 years before when I started fundraising, it was pre-GuideStar, it was Rolodex cards. And it was literally me calling people and just saying, hey, are you free for lunch? Or I'd love to have coffee with you next week. to the point of let's just let technology automate all the stuff. And by the way, we can do so much more. Let's just send out more. More is not the answer here. So I really hope at this crossroads and this kind of, we use the inflection point kind of term too often. At this inflection point for our sector, we take this advent of time that we can generate through precision and personalization, and we just pour it into human to human connection. And I'm super optimistic and excited because that feels right for most people. It's less is more. It feels good. It brings us back to center of why we got into the business to begin with. And we're able to just build off that kind of hit of dopamine and serotonin that both we and the donor get by having those types of conversations, bringing back more of that human side of what fundraising is all about.
I think that is the perfect bow to place on this conversation.
We're just getting on my soapbox. No, I totally appreciate having the space for this. It truly, it's a time of a lot of change, but it's also a really exciting time. So thanks for allowing the conversation to really talk through the things that we should be challenged with right now.